Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. I'm here to talk about the U.S. Repository Network, a project I've been working on with SPARC. So to jump right in, this started as a partnership between SPARC and CORE. CORE is the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. I have a brief description here of both organizations in case you're not familiar with either of them. And CORE launched Modernizing the Global Repository Network initiative in July of 2021. And in surveying their U.S. membership for that launch, they identified a clear priority for the U.S., and that was breaking down institutional silos and developing a more cohesive approach and greater collaboration around repositories. And then SPARC partnered with CORE to start the U.S. Repository Network initiative in September 2021 with the goal of addressing some of these issues. So the first step was developing a vision for U.S. repositories, and we wanted this to be really community-driven. So we put together a 63-member expert group that was representative of the different groups listed on the slide, as well as a range of enrollment sizes of the institutions, and tried to have geographic distribution as well throughout the U.S. And the expert group responded to a survey and participated in an ideation session to aid us in drafting a strategic vision for U.S. repositories, as did community calls with COPI, the Coalition of Open Access Policy Institutions, and OpenCon librarians. And I feel like I was teed up really well, both by Lisa's presentation and Ramune, Christy Holmes, one of Ramune's colleagues at Northwestern, was a member of our expert group and continues to be part of our steering group, which I'll talk about in a moment. The vision that we drafted was then reviewed by that expert group and then opened for public comment, and all of that input led to this community-driven strategic vision for U.S. repositories. So an interoperable network of repositories is an essential component of our national research infrastructure, offering rapid and open access to research, and plays a crucial role in collective efforts to transform global research communications, leading to a more open, inclusive, and equitable system. So clearly a lot of pieces that folks thought were important. And in addition to this vision, throughout the community consultation process, these characteristics emerged as important to the community, and the U.S. Repository Network will center these and work to advance them as we move forward. So we finished that visioning process over the summer of this year, and then we decided we needed a smaller group to help us with the action planning phase. So we have this inaugural steering group that is helping us with that work. Again, trying to be fairly representative geographically and by size of institution. We have some consortial folks as well in the mix. And as I mentioned, Christy Holmes from the Galter Health Sciences Library is part of that group. So far with the action plan, we're still working to finalize it, but we have identified 3 main areas of action. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these. The release of the August 2022 OSTP memorandum offers an immediate opportunity for us to engage with OSTP and federal funding agencies and to advocate on behalf of the U.S. Repository Network. And the entry point for this advocacy will be working in our group to develop desirable characteristics for publication repositories, which is something that's mentioned in the OSTP memo. And we hope that we can make them analogous to the desirable characteristics for data repositories that Lisa mentioned earlier. And the network will seek to work with OSTP and advocate for institutional repositories and all sorts of repositories within the U.S. In order to help them implement the public access guidance and make the distributed network of repositories viable solutions for compliance. In terms of developing network governance model, we set up that inaugural steering group, but we want to make sure that The US repository network is sustainable on an ongoing basis and is also a community-driven initiative. And so it's really important for us to create a community governance structure for the network for that sustainability. And then finally, success in this work requires a community invested in actively moving that strategic vision of US repositories forward. And the USRN will work to identify and build relationships with potential partners, in addition to increasing awareness of and participation in the network by the US repository community, which is one reason that I am here today to talk to all of you with medical institutional repositories about this work. So I do want to emphasize that the US Repository Network is an inclusive network. It's envisioned to be an inclusive community committed to advancing repositories in the US. And in this context, US repositories refers to all open research repositories based in the US, regardless of content, so data, publications, et cetera, host or platform. So as I said, repositories containing articles, data, graylit, emerging forms of scholarship, repositories hosted by higher education institutions, research centers, or other nonprofit organizations, and repositories using open source or vended platforms are considered to be part of this network. And all such repositories will be welcome to participate in the US Repository Network as we seek to build value for all repositories in the US, regardless of their ultimate level of active participation. So this is a short whirlwind tour of what we've been up to. If you take a picture of or if you capture the QR code on this slide, it will take you to a forum to sign up to get updates about the US Repository Network. We'd love to have more representation from the medical library community. And there's also a link to the web pages for the US Repository Network that live on the SPARC site, and my email address in case you have specific questions that you'd like to follow up with me on. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Tina. That was great. And I think it really does tie in well with what we've already kind of heard this morning. Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's appreciated. I think sometimes the medical community feels a little left out in the academic repository world. So this is really great to hear that you're welcoming us all to the table.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So our next presentation is from Federico Verlicchi at For Science. Federico, would you like to share your slides? Federico, do you want us to share those on our end? I think we have a copy of your slides. Would that be easier? We cannot hear you. No. Federico, maybe if you don't mind, we'll go to the next person while you work on some of the technical issues. Oh, okay. So while Federico comes back in, I think we'll go ahead and skip to our third presentation. I know, Arran, I can see you right there. So our third presentation, or second right now, is from Arran Griffith, who is going to showcase Lyrasis and Fedora. Arran, would you like to share your slides?
Yeah, just give me 1 second here.
And we can hear you, which is already a good thing.
Perfect. right, let's see here. Okay. It is not allowing me to share here. Just one sec here.
Otherwise, Erin, we have your slides, so we could share them.
Yeah, if you want, you
Easier.
can put them up, and yeah, that might be easier, and then we'll save this hassle.
Stephen, are you able to do that?
I'm running into a permissions issue.
Sorry for the glitch, everyone. We're Erin is gonna go ahead. We'll just share her slides. Despite practicing many times, as we've all done with tools like this, it never seems to quite work out on the day of the event. So we're going to share Erin's
It's really
slides.
a webinar unless something goes a little bit wrong.
That's right.
I saw them there. We're really close. I'll start, that way we're not taking up other people's time, because I see they're close to coming. So thank you for having me. My name's Erin Griffith. I'm the program manager at Fedora. So Fedora is an open source digital repository platform. We have our organizational home at Lyrasis, if anybody's familiar. So Lyrasis is a nonprofit membership organization whose mission it is to support enduring access to the world's shared academic, scientific, and cultural heritage materials. And we do this through leadership in open source technologies like our own. So Fedora is part of the DuraSpace Community Supported Programs Division at Lyrasis, alongside some other OSS that you might be familiar with, like DSpace, Archive Space, Collection Space, and Vivo. I'm just going to
I'm sorry, but it's making me sign into something to show your slides, and that's also new. I think because we have PDFs.
Oh.
But I'm going to try one last thing.
I can hit the next one, because the next slide is pretty, I'm going to describe it anyway. So if you want me to keep going to try to save time, I can absolutely.
Yeah, please keep going.
Absolutely. Okay, so what is Fedora? No problem. What is Fedora? So Fedora is actually an acronym. It stands for Flexible, Extensible Digital Object Repository Architecture. So in other words, it's a digital repository platform that's used for the management and dissemination of digital content. So it was originally founded in 1997 by Sandy Payette and Carl Lagos at Cornell University. And they were looking for a way to store and access digital content in a flexible way, so that as technology and methodologies evolved, and the repository architecture itself could do the same, while continuing to integrate with all of the overlaying systems and provide this continued extensibility. So it's especially suited for things like digital libraries for both access and preservation purposes. It's often used in institutions to provide specialized access to people's large and often complex digital collections, as well as storing and preserving research and scientific data. So, nearly 25 years later, Fedora has been through several version releases and iterations. And in June of 2021, we released the newest version of the software, which is Fedora 6.0. And this was the largest major release of the core code since Fedora 4 in 2014. So Fedora is entirely open source and supported by a small paid program team, but a very large and active and engaged user community from around the world. So yeah, that's the perfect slide there. That's great. Fedora can store, preserve, and provide access to any type of digital content. So you can put whatever you'd like in it. It can hold any file type, and you can store millions of objects of varying sizes within a Fedora repository. One of the main features of something like Fedora is that it's flexible. So within a Fedora repository, you can model your content however you'd like, and you can use any kind of relationships in whatever kinds of complexities you need. So in this way, you can really do a whole lot with this. And it does this through the support for semantic relationships, so using linked data and RDF to build your different object models that are going to meet your specific needs and use cases. So Fedora is also designed to interoperate with other applications and services. So Fedora is not often found standing alone or functioning on its own. A lot of people will use it for their digital preservation needs, and then they'll have a front end tied into it like Islandora or any of the Samvera suite of applications, or oftentimes a front end that they've made to meet their specific use cases. So Fedora provides the preservation solution, and then they have an integration for the front end. So you can scroll to the next one there. Thanks. So why would you use Fedora? So there's a few things here, and I'm not going to go through them all really, but flexibility is the main one. I talked about a little bit. It supports very simple or complex use cases. A lot of times, you know, you start out really simple, and as you build over time, things become a little bit more complex. So there's no restrictions within Fedora on things like metadata. You can do a lot with your content in it, and you take control over what your repository looks like. Fedora content in Fedora is durable. So many of our newly incorporated features in Fedora 6, which I'm going to talk really briefly about, were put in place to ensure that your objects are preserved using standards that will persist long after the hardware is gone. And another thing that we have is that Fedora is standards-based. So we use standard web conventions for interacting with the application. We use things like REST, we use linked data platform, we use the Oxford Common File layout, which I'll explain, and Memento for versioning, as well as there is a community developed Fedora API. So we are a globally installed user base, like I mentioned before. There's a lot of known instances of Fedora within some very powerful institutions around the world. And while we're predominantly North American based, we do have active users outside of North America, in Europe, the UK, and even further abroad than that. And so for us, this is really important. And I know a lot of people, when they're evaluating open source, they like to know what other people are using. So knowing that you know, these institutions have been running Fedora for a long time gives us validation that the software is working to serve our community. And then lastly, we are a community supported open source program. So much of our work, you know, is thanks to our community members. And like I said, we have this very active and engaged community surrounding our software. So you can flip to the next there. So this is the current state of the program in the community today. As I mentioned, our most current release was version 6, and 6.2 was released in July. 6.3, actually, we made an announcement, was released yesterday as a release candidate. So things are progressing along. And another note here that we have approximately 350 known installations around the world. So this is that globally installed user base, but unfortunately being open source, we don't always know exactly where we are and how we're being used. So this is our most current information that we have. So our program and priorities and goals are set and maintained by our governance group, which is formed by individuals from contributing institutions and elected community members. Fedora committers are responsible for a large portion of our development work and the technical support within the community. And we're very fortunate to have some very strong and tenured individuals on our committer team, which have been with us for a long time. And lastly, we routinely engage with our community through these methods. You know, Slack is generally the best way to get a hold of us, but we have all of these outlets for communicating with our users. Next. And so these are just some of the feature highlights that the newest version of Fedora has to offer. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can, you know, read more about them with the resources I have at the end. But the biggest and probably most important feature here is the adoption of the Oxford Common File layout, or OCFL for short, as a preservation standard within our persistence layer. So for anybody that's following along Fedora, we replaced the old backend of Fedora 4 and 5, which was based on mode shape, and replaced it with OCFL, which gives us a much more transparent and persistent layer that's focused solely on preservation. So we also know that Fedora 3 is probably one of the most commonly used versions of our software that's out in the wild, but unfortunately, it is end of life and no longer being supported by the community. So we were awarded a grant back in 2020 to help create tools and documentation to get people from 3 to 6 and lower the migration barriers. So now, thanks to that grant work, we have this very extensive tooling and documentation to bring people forward to the most current version of the software. And so all of these features listed here are just ways of demonstrating how Fedora 6 is offering really the best solution for our users, better preservation support, performance improvements from versions 4 and 5, and hopefully easier and fewer migrations in the future. And that is because of this, if you want to flip to the next slide. So really quickly about the Oxford Common File layout, or OCFL. So this is a specification that describes an application-independent approach to the storage of digital information in a very structured, transparent, and predictable manner. So what it is it's the standard that's designed to promote long-term object management best practices within digital repositories. It is designed and developed by an editorial board, and they're responsible for the upkeep and continued development and maintenance of the spec. So Fedora uses a Java implementation of the OCFL. So the OCFL is the spec, and we use the Java implementation. And the idea here is that OCFL is going to offer this kind of complete data transparency and give you control over your repository. So data that's stored in an OCFL format is entirely transparent. It's written in plain text files, and the standard dictates the way that that's done so that you can see everything on disk. And for us, this was super important to our users because it really is the foundation of what Fedora is intended to do. And thanks to the OCFL and the standardized way of writing files to disk, your data is preserved in a parsable way that's machine and human readable, so that should the unthinkable ever happen and your hardware fails that your repository is on, you can simply take your OCFL files, move them elsewhere, and stand up your repository again from the files on disk. So that's just one of the many benefits of the OCFL. I would encourage you to read more about that. But we can flip to the next one here. And this is just an example. I wanted to give an example of what some of our members are using Fedora for in different ways. So these are some screenshots from the National Library of Medicine's two of their different sites. So their main digital collection here is a Fedora, Solar, and Blacklight stack. And one copy, just to give you scale idea, one copy of this repository is approximately 100 terabytes. And they use this repository to house digitized books, manuscripts, archival documents, still images, sound recording, films and videos, and born digital PDFs. So this is that flexibility and variety that Fedora can store. And they also have another product which is called Profiles in Science. And this is a site of curated collections. And what it does is it reuses content that's stored within their Fedora repository. And they use Spotlight as the front end. And they do this to take advantage of the IIIF integration, which allows them to build and maintain these profile collections using the digital collections IIIF manifest. So again, lots of different ways that you can use Fedora, even within the same institution. Next. And just a few more here really quickly. Sorry, the images are super small, but we have Arminda, which is Whitman College's institutional repository. They recently migrated to Fedora 6, so they're running Fedora 6 and then Islandora 2.0 front end. In the middle is Deep Blue Data, which is University of Michigan's research data repository. They're running Fedora 4 with Hyrax. And then the bottom is Avalon Media Systems at the University of Virginia. So they have Fedora 4 repository serving up audio and visual collections at their institution. And lastly, so again, this is just a list of important resources that I mentioned. There's links for downloading and learning more about the Oxford Common File layout, that specification. But I really just would encourage you to join the community, or at minimum lean in and hear what we're offering. Like I said, Slack is the best way to get a hold of us, but someone is always available to answer a question, or you can come and drop in on our weekly tech meeting, which happens on Thursdays at 11 Eastern. It's entry level it's open to all levels, and there is space at the beginning saved for people to drop in and ask questions, even if you're not a Fedora user. So we would encourage you to do this. And so again, just, a lot of this work can't be done without the generous support of our members. So becoming a member of Fedora helps us ensure that our work to continue to protect and preserve these priceless collections and all the data that's stored in repositories around the world continues, so that we don't leave any of these collections at risk. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Arran. Appreciate it. And next we'll go back to Federico. Federico, would you like me to share your slides, or do you have audio? Just looking to make sure Federico is still here. I don't see him in our list of panelists anymore, so we will hopefully get back to him. Our next presentation is from Kevin Kochanski at scientist.com. Kevin, would you like to share your slides?
I'm sure going to try.
If you can. Okay, otherwise I've got them.
Let me get this view going. We'll give this one try, and if not, we'll let you take over. All right. Are you seeing my slides?
Looks good. Yep.
Great. I don't know how I made that happen. Thank you to the MIRL committee for having me here. I'm here to talk a little bit about Hyku, which is an open source repository solution, and with an angle of collaboration and commitment and what it takes to be part of an open source data repository. And I made a special slide because I always forget to introduce myself. So now I always had a slide for it. So I have to stop there. My name is Kevin Kochanski. I am client liaison at softwareservicesbyscientists.com. But I'm also chair of the Hyku interest group and an active member in the Samvera and Hyku communities. And I maintain some of Hyku's web presence. It's really important to note that Hyku is an open source solution and that there's a diverse community of contributors actively involved. So what is Hyku? It's a turnkey Samvera repository solution. And what is Samvera? It's an open source repository community whose technical solution is comprised of a set of core components that provides interfaces interacting with Fedora and Solr, PCDM compliant data models, and other commonly needed features like characterization, text extraction, and derivative generation. On top of that, Hyrax is a Rails engine that provides a fully featured Samvera repository front end, bringing in features like user and admin dashboards, the ability to upload via cloud providers, citation integration, file auditing and versioning, access controls, and lease and embargo functionality. Now we're getting there. Finally, Hyku utilizes Hyrax to create a ready-to-use repository application, adding additional user management, theming templates, and other design options. It also adds the bulk racks gem for bulk content import and export, and multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy is an integral part of what Hyku brings to the table. It means that in one instance of the software, you can have multiple discrete, even different branded repositories. A great use case is a college that has many campuses with individual repositories, or a library consortia that each member university has their own repository on one instance of the software. And Palni and Palsi Library Consortia's Hyku for Consortia program is a great example of that. They have one instance of Hyku stood up with at least 40 live active individual member repositories existing in it. But jumping to some of the benefits of Hyku, it's got a really easy to use search front end. So it's inviting to users to discover the information they need to get to. This includes faceted filtering, robust faceted filtering, visually useful and functional filter chips, result display options, hyperlinked metadata, and visual thumbnails. Work and collection management is very easy in Hyku. It has an admin UI that allows you to easily create a work, set visibility and permission access to the work, create a user submission workflow with mediated deposit that requires an admin to approve or comment and push back on work before it can be published. It also has an easy collection management to add works to and arrange, and the ability to highlight individual works and individual collections on the homepage. I will jump back to a homepage visual here. This is the Samvera community repository where all the community assets are stored. It's in an instance of Hyku, and it's mostly conference presentations and that kind of collateral. But getting down to the medical world, we've got a wide variety of Hyku use cases in the wild, which is really exciting for those of us who have followed the community for a while. Institutional repositories, just one of those is University of Tennessee, who's working on a system right now. For cultural heritage content, the British Library has the shared research repository with multiple cultural institutions from the UK that have their individual tenant repositories. Public documents, the US Department of Transportation has adopted Hyku for their next version of the Bureau of Transportation Statistics National Transportation Library, and we'll be making transportation documents available online through Hyku when that goes live. Library consortia, I already talked about what Palni and Palsi have done with Hyku for consortia. They've been real leaders in this technology. Research data. Caveat here is that Rutgers University built the Virtual Data Collaboratory, and it's technically a Hyrax system, not Hyku, but for all intents and purposes, the functionality of it is the same that you would find in Hyku, so I'll mention it here just because they've got this great use case. Rutgers supports large-sized data sets with custom Globus integration for large file transfer. There's other community solutions for large data transfer as well. And we've got one medical institution that is utilizing Hyku, and this is the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. and I will show you a little bit more about what they're doing. The URL is there. It's publicly available if you want to go poke around. They have all kinds of content in their system. It is a university campus, so they have photos, they have data sets, they've got text, including reports and articles, workbooks and textbooks, instructional posters, and they've got videos, including lectures, supplementary course materials, and that sort of thing. University of Colorado was drawn to Hyku because its multi-tenancy allowed multiple campuses to set up their digital repositories. The primary campus for this, driving it, was the Anschutz Medical Campus, but they also have plans to create individual repositories for other campuses, including Colorado Springs, Denver, and the law school, in the one instance of the software. It's worth noting that their front end here, while it has a lot of the same functionality, is actually a proprietary React front end. It's not part of the open source. So as part of open source, collaboration is really important. And I quote the Samvera community's motto here: if you want to go far, go together. The Hyku roadmap is an example of how this community collaborates in order to improve and sustain the software. Code contribution is core to open source success. Major projects sponsor key features and invest in sharing them back to the community. Recent developments that have been sponsored by partner projects include additional UX theming templates to make Hyku applicable to different use cases, enhanced user and group management for permissions and roles, and DOI integration as well as ORCID integration. The community built around Hyku is fairly strong. The Hyku interest group meets once a month. It's a more user-centric forum, not as technical, though some developers join. They discuss individual projects and progress on those projects. Emphasis here is on sharing ideas versus proprietary features. It's on aligning and avoiding redundant parallel development. And it's a great place to drop in and ask questions from Hyku users in the community. I'll give you a little more information on that later, but anybody who's interested in Hyku can certainly drop by. Active community members also benefit from staying tuned to Samvera conferences and presentations and engaging as partners and the governance that is involved with partner meetings. So the commitment side of open source, it requires commitment. Why choose open source? These might be obvious answers, but pride and community recognition are important to a lot of organizations. Some institutions require open source first kind of initiatives versus commercial software solutions. It leaves users unchained to commercial services and those sometimes self-serving roadmaps that commercial services follow. It keeps things in step with open data and the idea of education and sharing content. And it also is supported by increased adoption. The more folks that adopt this kind of software, the larger community investment there is, and the more sustainable the software becomes. Considerations to adopting an open source solution are requirements gaps. Sometimes if there's a gap, feature development or custom API integrations, for instance, could require an additional investment. Or you may be able to wait for those features if they're being sponsored by another project. But as many people know, development in academia can sometimes take longer than expected. Good news, though, is that Hyku really is ready to go. It's constantly evolving and being improved, but it becomes more robust each year. However, if you had the capabilities to download Hyku from the repository now, from the GitHub repository now, and get it stood up on your servers, it is a very functional application. Making it even easier for folks, there are a couple of hosted solutions out there. Hyku Up is one, and U repositories is one as well. So what's next? Simply, as a community, we've been able to benefit from a diverse set of institutions that are collaborating, but we'd love more collaboration from the medical community. I think there's a great use case here for Hyku software. For those who are interested, I think that visiting that Samvera community repo is a good place to start, poking around there. Joining Slack, requesting an invitation to Samvera Slack. There's a Hyku channel in there, and there's also a Google group for Hyku. As I mentioned, the interest group meets the last Thursday of each month, though that's a little wonky because of the holiday season. And you can reach out to me. I am with a service provider, but we're also stewards of this software for the community. Always happy to answer questions, give demos, and help get folks involved if they're interested in Hyku. Thanks again for having me, and enjoy the rest of your symposium.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Appreciate it. And next, we're going to circle back to Federico Verlicchi. Federico, are you able to share your slides?
Can you guys hear me now?
I feel like I need to
Can
stop.
hear you.
Sorry.
Oh, yes. Thank you,
Okay.
Kevin. Kevin will
Thank you.
stop, and then you can start, Fed, and we can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I don't know why. Well, it's one of the first time I use WebEx and I had to connect the audio with my phone because it's not recognizing the microphone in my laptop. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
We can see your slides. Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
And Federico, I hate to cut you a little bit short, but I think we'll have about 9 minutes for you because we needed to fit someone else in because of our technical problems. Thank you.
No problem. So my name is Federico. I'm business developer at For Science, and today I will talk about a case study, the challenge of building an Italian national repository dedicated to the field of medical research. So throughout this presentation, we will talk about a little bit about us at For Science, an overview of the Italian health system, and then a quick overview of the DSpace CRIS 7 platform, the main challenges and the proposal of this platform and this project, the opportunities for the future, and the United States medical institution environment using this space. So a little bit about us. We would like to enable implementation of the transnational important policies of open research, research impact, and digital preservation. For Science provides solutions for research, information, and data management, and for cultural heritage. We're a certified platinum provider of DSpace and a major contributor to DSpace, leading DSpace 7 committers. And our solutions include DSpace CRIS, DSpace CLAMP, OJS, and Dataverse. Our services range from installation, configuration, hosting and maintenance, system integration, customization, and consultancy. And our solution also support compliance with key international standards such as OpenAIRE, ORCID, SERIF, and IIIF. We believe that security certification is not a matter of compromise, especially in open science. Our solutions are secure by design, and openness without security would be counterproductive, and security without openness would be unproductive. Our solutions are based on open source software, open standards, interoperability, preservation, collaboration, and innovation. We're a very fast-growing organization serving over 100 clients in 5 continents worldwide, and we're still growing. For an overview of the Italian health system, the Italian healthcare system is a national health service based in regions, therefore is a little bit different than the United States one. The system provides universal coverage free of charge for all Italian citizens as well as foreign citizens living in the country with a regular permit. The service is free of charge at the point of service and is guided by the principles of universal coverage, solidarity, human dignity, and health. The national healthcare system is mainly funded through national and regional taxes, supplemented by private expenditure and insurance schemes. Public funding made up approximately 3/4 of the total healthcare spending. So why DSpace CRIS is the perfect CRIS rings platform for universities and institutions? It's a tool that enables secure, integrated, and interoperable research information and data management in a single solution. Is a tool that is compliant with and supports key international standards, facilitating interoperability and data transfer. It's based on DSpace, providing broader functionalities and an expanded data model relying on its large community. It's a comprehensive, free, and open source research information management system and the first of its kind. So why institutions need it? Well, DSpace CRIS will help you to efficiently assess their performance and allocate resources, to promote their assets and activities, to track and apply for new funding opportunities, and to exchange information with external systems and databases. So why is the DSpace CRIS so unique? DSpace CRIS helps you to collect and manage research data and information, including researchers and groups, departments and organizational units, laboratories, infrastructures, projects, contracts and events, publications, and many more, everything in just one solution. So the tool moving forward in the short term is always going to be aligned with the DSpace releases. will support for metadata in multiple languages, visualization of information related with user language. In the medium term, we'll stay aligned with international standards such as CORE, NNGR, CORE Notify, and OpenAir. We will provide an out-of-the-box solution for the specific research domain needs that are always evolving. It will increase the integrations and the possibility of information interchanges to reduce to the minimum the researchers' efforts. In the long term, there will be a modularization of the platform, lightening it, focusing exclusively on the specificities of the domain. It will also move the general capabilities applicable to multiple domains on this space, and it will allow the extension of the platform through external add-ons easily maintainable, such as AI, analytics, and many more. Why is it important to adopt this space, Chris, in the medical world? Well, in the medical world, it's really important to share and disseminate research papers and research material for public health and citizen benefits, such as articles, datasets, diagnostic images, healthcare protocols, therapies, patents, and much more. And with the space, Chris, you can do all these things in just one platform. The project proposal for the Italian health system was the development of a repository for many healthcare institutions. Each institute will have its own community inside the repository in which to organize and provide access to its content according to a common standard aligned with the reporting requirements of the funders that defines the type of materials supported. What can the single institute do with their community inside of the platform and this is the repository solution? They can decide whether to activate a flow verification of information and define its actors, decide whether or not to activate the automatic recovery flow from PubMed for its researcher and afferents, and manage the approval of what has been identified. It can also assign persistent identifiers, Angular GUI, that can be maintained even if the institute decides in the future to leave the collective initiative. Other things that the institute can do with the platform is to customize the branding, changing logo, colors, and style to align with the institutional brand. They can also have pages for searching and browsing content limited to their material, generate the export Excel necessary for reporting and analysis, as well as access and update their content according to the privileges available to the user via REST API. For the access,
Federico, sorry to interrupt. We have about 1 minute left for you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, no problem. There are also at a centralized level, there would be subscriptions such as ORCID, Scopus, and Web of Science. And for the opportunities in the future, there could be extension, integration, and add-ons that can be added to the platform. And for the healthcare in the United States, we can see from this PubMed.com research that this space is the most common repository solution. And there are many functionalities that would be enhanced in the future, such as ORCID integration that is already inside this space, Chris, and DUI mounting. So For Science was able to develop a plan for a very complicated healthcare system like the Italian one. Repositories will be crucial for medical institutions in the future, and the space, Chris, is the right tool to help you enhance your visibility and prestige. And because of For Science decades of experience in the repository world, we're here to support you in any aspect of your project, and we would love to assist you to write a new, more open future together. Thank you for your attention. For any question, please don't hesitate to contact me at the email address that you see in this slide. You can also connect to the QR code to follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date, or go to our website, forscience.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federico, and thanks for persisting with us. Our last presentation in our service provider session today is from Luca Belletti at Digital Commons. So Federico, if you want to stop sharing, then we can give Luca the mic, and Luca will have until, we've got about 9 minutes for your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brenda. Right, is audio working? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, halfway through it. And let me see if, are you able to see my screen? Let me
They look
launch
great.
Presentation. Excellent. There we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Luca Belletti. I'm a senior product manager working at Digital Commons, which is a suite of products by Elsevier. And today I'd like to show you the ways that Digital Commons data supports an institution research data management journey. I'm going to go a bit faster than I planned in the first slide because we haven't got a lot of time, but also because thanks to the excellent presentation by Dr. Fedora, many of the people here will already be knowledgeable about a couple of aspects I wanted to mention. So I wanted to start with the question, why does research data management matter? And for me, there are three main reasons why. First reason, it's the ever-growing requirements that funding institutions mandate. So this is what Dr. Fedora was mentioning earlier on, the NIH mandate, the OSTP memo from August. It is now necessary for anybody requesting a grant from a US funding institution to submit a plan outlining how they're going to store the data, share the data, manage it, etc. Second reason, it's a benefit for authors. There have been some studies I've seen that show that research publications that link to the data that supports the research can have up to about 25% more citation, a higher citation count than those that don't link to the research data. There might be a number of reasons. It could be correlated to better quality articles because they put the effort in also putting the data out there. Adding the data makes the research more credible, I think, as well, because it encourages reproducibility. And finally, data sharing encourages reuse, which might further contribute to citation counts and the visibility of a particular piece of research. Third and final reason is the importance to be able to measure the impact of one's research, which in turn leads to improvement in reputation, prestige, status of a research institution. The screenshot you see there is from a data set on our platform. On the left, very high level count of views, downloads and mentions. And then you can click through to see the actual details and some snippets from blogs, tweets, etc. Now let's get on to the main part, which is how does digital common data help the research management journey of an institution? First of all, what is digital commons data? It is one of four modules within digital commons, which is a product suite. It is an institutional repository with specialized tools to manage research data, an institutional data repository, if you will. And it sits alongside three other modules. One of them is an institutional repository to store any sort of content, not specifically data. There's a module for exhibits to curate, showcase portfolios of works, and a DC Journals, which is a publishing platform, all connected together. They're all a hosted solution in the cloud, don't require software installations or upgrades. Everything is managed on our side, so very simple and easy to use and maintain. Let's have a quick look at the features that DC Data offers to various personas working at an institution. I've presented them in 6 groups of features. First of all, storage, which is the need to store data. Primary use case, we use the Amazon S3 platform, which has outstanding security and availability track record. Alternatively, we can also use the institution's own storage, provided it is S3 compatible. In addition to that, every data set is also archived for long-term preservation by DANS, a third party that ensures it will always be available regardless of any changes that might impact the availability on Elsevier's platform or even Amazon's operations. Second group of features, with DC Data, the institution receives a showcase, which is a page on a customized domain that matches the institution's domain and the branded look and feel that displays all the data sets generated by that institution. This is done in conjunction with another product, Data Monitor, which I'll mention later on, which harvests and archives, indexes, and enriches content and can retrieve all the content from an institution and then display it all together on the DCD platform. You can also create collections of data sets, and they all have their own URL, and they can be displayed in a featured area at the top of the showcase page. Then there are collaboration features. In particular, there is the possibility of creating multiple project workplaces where researchers can invite other people, colleagues at their institution, but also externally, to collaborate, to work together towards the creation of a data set, and they can share data sets and files together, and then result in publishing the data set. Features around curation. The most important one is a moderation workflow. The institution can assign a moderator role to one or more people within their staff, and the researchers that publish the data sets usually don't have a moderator role, and so you can ensure that somebody kind of checks that everything is correct, all the metadata is there, everything is done in alignment with the guidelines from the institution. Another role that can be given is the role of the administrator, again, within the institution. These people have got the possibility of viewing all the data sets, editing them, view all the users, giving them additional roles, and also configure the site for the external viewers. And finally, DC Data gives also a full set of reporting features that give visibility on the content that you have, the metrics on how viewers use it and engage with it. It's something I showed you earlier on in those metrics snapshot, but also there's a readership dashboard map where you can see in real time all the access to your content on a map, and you can view where the users and the viewers are located.
Luca, we have about 1 minute left.
Yeah, and I've got one slide left, so perfect. So on this final slide, I'd like to mention briefly how DC Data works with other Elsevier products to support those specific use cases within the research data lifecycle, starting from the top, enabling open science through research data sharing and reuse. Alongside Digital Commons data, we also offer Mendeley data, which is a free generalist repository, one of the 7 that Lisa Fedora mentioned earlier on are part of the GREY initiative. It is powered by this Digital Commons data, so it is basically the same code base with fewer functionalities because the premium ones are targeted to institutions. Second use case, promoting data management and curation. This is something that the features that are specific to DC Data fulfill, like secure hosting, collaboration, admin and curation tools. Third use case is monitoring the sharing of the institutional data. And this is with the Data Monitor product that I mentioned earlier on, harvesting, indexing data, enriching the metadata. And it also powers a search functionality integrated within DC Data. And finally, the use case for showcases institutional research data, which is provided by DC Data with the showcase page that I mentioned earlier on, the collections where you can display all of your content. If you would like to find out more, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. My email is there. I'll also put it in the chat for anyone who would like to reach out. So thank you very much for your attention.